Haidong! In this video, we're going to talk about basics, part 7. In the last video, we talked about chiante, our walking stance, with our sadon pegi. Again, that's the forward, the back, the left, and the right. So, allegedly, we've done walking stance a few times, so the next thing on our list for basics will be our sodosei, or our short stance. I talked about this in a previous video, but in general, right, so our teidosei, right, so we talked about teidosei, so it's about here. So sodosei, or a short or low stance, is another one I've heard, is just teidosei with a dead leg. So it's here, just with a dead leg. It's also at this point that I would like to talk about an aspect that actually a commenter mentioned. So with our teidosei, I mentioned, oh, you want your front foot to be on a 45, right? You might be wondering, all right, why that 45, right? Why not go straight forward? Similar to how we do our bomsei, at least how I do my bomsei. So why don't we have our front foot going straight forward? Well, we can thank physics, right? So physics and like statics and all that fun stuff. So if we think about, if we did have our front foot facing forward, right? That's going to be fine if I'm moving this way, right? So you can already guess where that's going to go. So if I'm just cutting without hitting the wall, forward, that's okay, right? Nothing really too crazy. But the more I start to go horizontal, the more off balance I'm going to be. Versus if I have completely horizontal, center motions are really going to kick out my hip. They're going to do damage to my leg. It's not great. So happy medium, right? So if we have our front foot, and again both feet in this case, on that nice 45, or for me sometimes it's closer to a 30-degree angle from north, that's going to be really good. So the forward momentum is going to be absorbed, right? Because most of my weight, most of the angle of the foot is forward, but it's going to be that horizontal aspect that's going to absorb, again, the horizontal aspects of our cuts. So if we just did center cuts, we can probably do a forward-facing foot. In fact, we do this with our choshansei. But because this stance is a universal stance, a stance that we want to do for a lot of different cuts, we want that on the 45 so we can absorb diagonal cuts, right? This is leaning way too far forward, but you get the idea, right? So I can lean forward, not unlike, again, the beginning of Sangsu 7, right? You can lean forward and be able to push back, twist around. So that angle is going to be really good for that. Now, that's going to be the same for our sodosei, right? So if we're in our sodosei, again, it's teidosei with a dead leg, we're going to have that. So likewise, so if I want to move forward, fine. If I want to absorb my horizontal aspect of my cut, also fine. But there's going to be this one aspect about sodosei which makes it both very weird, right? Because it's an aspect that most other martial arts don't have in their stances. But also it's going to be our saving grace. It's like the unsung hero of Gumdo. That's going to be our sodosei. What am I rambling on about, right? So what is that thing that's different from our teidosei, or from our teidosei, from our chiansei, all these different stances that sodosei does? It's going to be our back foot, right? So you might argue, like, all right, you do the back foot thing a lot with our walking stance, not so much with our teidosei, but take a look at our sodosei, right? So if I'm moving in, that back foot needs to come in. Now for a brief overview, right? So again, I said teidosei with dead leg. You want that back knee almost tucked behind this side of your thigh, right? Or this side of your calf, right? So almost like you're twisting in this way. Now, why is that important? So that means this leg is no longer straight forward, but slightly on an angle. This foot is slightly on an angle. These are going to counterbalance, right? So if I want to cut this way, this foot will absorb it, but this one will counteract it, right? So as I'm cutting in, I guess I'm always looking over my shoulders in case I hit the door, wall. So if I'm cutting in, right, as the blade is coming this way, my knee can absorb it, right, so I'm not going to crumple, but this back foot's going to counteract, right? So as I come in, right, so that way I can really cut without really getting that much off balance. Now if we cut from the other direction, so it's no longer our back foot that's going to counteract the momentum, the horizontal momentum, it's going to be our front foot. So as I'm coming in this way, right, this horizontal motion will be absorbed by the geometry of my front foot this time, because it's going the opposite direction, right? So it's here, right? Now the back foot is still going to come in, right? It's got to help synchronize the movement, but it doesn't need to go in on an angle this way to counteract this. It just needs to go straight so I can just offset the forward momentum of the cut, like so. So notice my back foot did not need to jam in just like I needed to cut this way, right? Notice that my back knee, I'll actually go this way so it might be a little easier. Notice that the back knee needs to counteract that horizontal momentum. Versus if I go the other direction, my front knee's going to do it. Make sense? So in terms of transitioning from our walking stance to our sotose, it's pretty easy, right? So we just did the apro, guiro, charo, uro, right? So now we're going to just, all we're going to do, coming in this way. Make sense? So it's pretty straightforward. So if we're here, we're going to do chase bokuseo, which means just turn defense. It's going to turn defense. Now there's going to be a couple ways to think about this, right? So there's kind of like the swinging door idea, and it's also the turn and lunge idea. Both are sort of okay, like the happy medium is going to be between these two. But I'll show you the swinging door first. So in terms of a cut, right? Think about this knee opening as this one closes in, right? So this one opens, this one closes. So if I'm here, open, close, here. This is kind of like the step motion, which is okay, right? So the reason this is not going to be the best option is because it's going to cause a lot of strain on your smaller muscles, right? So if we're here, and I'm going to open up while I have a lot of weight on that leg, there's going to be a lot of tension and twisting in the inside of that knee. And for someone with half the lateral meniscus, it's not fun. It's not fun for that. So this is fine if you're kind of, just nice quick cut, right? Another way to think of it is if you're here, you're going to turn, right? You're going to turn and then lunge cut. Turn, lunge cut. So that's going to be a little bit easier on the knees. That's going to give you a lot more forward momentum. But the real thing that you want to do is probably like that, again, the happy medium between these two. From here, all you're going to do is a few cuts, right? So if we're here, turn, cut, get a nice happy medium. You start to turn as you gain your momentum, right? So you can lean, cut, lean, cut, lean, cut, right? Eventually, so you're going to do that a couple times, again, just get your students moving. Make sure you don't do it too much because, especially if this is the beginning of your class, this might be kind of hard on the knees, especially if they haven't really warmed up enough. So be careful about this, but after that, we're going to talk about chochonsei. Now for our penultimate combination, right, is chochonsei, right? So this is going to be our high guard. So from here, right, all you're going to do is step forward, center cut, in shiansei. You're going to bring the sword over your shoulder as you step back into a nice teirei facing this direction, one-handed, turn, two ways, right? So 3 seconds, but 2 ways. You can go equal and opposite, and I'll do this another angle so you can see, or with it, this way. That's really going to be up to you or up to your master, whoever really is more responsible for these ideas. But either is canonical, either is fine. It really also depends on the situation. I tend to go equal and opposite when I'm in basics, but I also tend to go with it when I'm in the form. Doesn't really matter. But the main idea, right, so while I'm facing this way, so we'll find out in post if this actually works. Ideally, you, my enemy, do not see my sword until it is ready to cut you, right? So you don't see this going on, like it's not a bicep curl. The idea is the blade is up, which you can't see, allegedly, as it comes up this way, right? So equal and opposite here. So again, notice the chest is open, and then land, right? So from the side, right? So we just ended our sotose. We're going to step forward, jiansei. Over your shoulder, that's that check. I'm going to cut here, although my stance is facing this way. I'm going to move forward. Bang, right? Turn. Again, blade up. 1, 2, 3. Or 1, 2, 3. And then again, from here, step forward, cut, over your shoulder, cut, turn, 1, 2, 3. Now if you're Federation and you really want to go hardcore with the Federation ideas, your high guard is going to be up here. So I talked about why it's up here in the previous video, but the main idea is if you have a really heavy weapon, it's easier to maintain the weight here as opposed to here. Although this is a nice fighting stance, it's going to be difficult if you have a heavy weapon. But here, right? All you're going to do, so notice my front foot can actually be facing forward. So this is going to be a little bit different from what we did with our teirose. But why? So we're going to be able to step forward. So I know I'm going forward. This stance is intended to go forward. My front foot can also face forward. So if I'm here, right, so if you can't see it in the camera, here, right, all I need to do is quick step, right, so boom, right. Notice, the tip does not go back and then throw forward again. It's here. All I'm going to do is step. The sword's going to come down, right, again, over your shoulder. Big ol' cut, turn, 1, 2, 3, and you have a high guard. That's your chochansei. Now for our ultimate, or our last guard, actually, technically, we have 2 more guards, but we did not know it before. So from here, so the old ways, we used to just go ban for chiase, right? So for our low guard. But there's actually a secret second one. So from here, right? So we're in our high guard. As you bring your back foot in into a walking stance, you're actually going to tuck it to your left haosungsei. Now if you're used to bankok, right? So the 3rd degree forms, right? This is your guard, right? This is how you start. So here, teirose, bring it in and then lower and do chiase. So again, chiase is our low guard. There's going to be different variations of it. In fact, something you might be more familiar with if you're in Yedo, right? So this is our 2-handed guard. Our 1-handed is just this, right? Because if you think about in Yedo 9, it's 1, 2, 1, 2. This is going to be our 1-handed chiase. But we have 2 hands, so we're going to be able to use the back end of the sword to our benefit. One more time from the side. So from here, again, high guard. As you bring your back foot into walking, left haosungsei, and I'm going to step forward into your chiase. So a couple things to note with your chiase. So again, the blade is off to the side, right? So it's not straight up and down like Kendo's geidon, right? It's also not curved like Iron Gate in Hima. It's going to be blade out, so you're going to be intending to use the false edge or the back end of the sword. So this is a very defensive position. It's also a very strong position. If you ever face me in a match, I love this guard because I can do quite a lot from it. So here, right? So the tip is kind of like on the 45. I'm going to try to step as far back as I can so you can hopefully see it. The tip is on the 45 here. Notice, it's very easy to see this way, it's not here, right? This is not going to give you anything, right? This is going to be I'm trying to look at myself in the mirror. Yeah, this is going to be very weak, right? Right? Versus, if you have a slightly wider stance and tip is a little bit more forward, this, as you step, right? So watch, as you step, you can prepare even further back, right? So the tip, the sword more stays where it is. I'm going to step forward, past it, and then boom, the nice, powerful upper block. So again, this is chiase, a really wonderful guard. And from here, we usually do, again, upro, right? Someone's trying to cut you, but you're still in defense. Duiro, charo, uro, and then finally, you can chaka. Now, there are a couple things more I would like to note with the movement. So depending on your master and depending on how he or she is teaching, what they might do with this guard is going to be much slower, right? So instead of what I just did with it might be more that's working on something completely different, but it is working on something very also important, right? It's going to be working on your ability to control your body pretty much at whatever position, right? It is hard to be able to advance without being like, right? So push, like just in case I need to bail, I can, right? So this works on something very different. This is me being able to control my space by like the millimeter, right? The second it's too close, I can either turn block or do something like that, right? So depending on how your master teaches, it could be very slow this way, but either way, make sure what you know what he or she wants. But again, both of them are going to be working on important stuff. And there you have it. So that is the Gumdo basics explained a little bit more in depth than potentially what you want to do. But hopefully this gives you some ideas about how to interpret the basics, right? Just as a brief overview, because there's a couple hours worth of content, I think. So I guess a brief overview of things to consider, right? So the basics are really well developed as a beginning exercise, right? So it starts off with just the upper body. It also works on building up your lungs, right? So you start with just Chum-pegi, which is 1 breath, 1 cut. Then Cha-u-pegi, which is 1 breath, 2 cuts. Samdan, 3 cuts. And then eventually Guangsha, 6 cuts. So it builds up your endurance, it builds up your oxygen levels, and also it builds up your capacity for your lungs. Then you start moving around, and you start going into different defenses. You start, turning. You especially do the more difficult stuff near the end, right? So with the knee twist with the sodosei. So you're doing quite a lot of stuff by the end. So by the time you're done, you've done. You got warm up for your upper body with your kimase. You've done a lot of stepping and warming up your joints with the teidosei and the sodosei. You've worked on your controlled breathing with the 3 seconds for high guard. You worked on remembering all those many different guards that you can do, right, with the Paosensei, with the other Paosensei, with your low guard, with your high guard, with your middle guard. So you covered quite a lot of good stuff in a pretty short amount of time, because obviously you're not going to take several hours to go through your basics, right? You can, right? And as a way to teach, so like going through your kimase, right? Going through like an hour of that stuff will obviously teach your students something, but also you can go through all of the basics in like 10 minutes or something like that, depending how quickly you go through it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more content to talk about, right? So like I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent with our Chiansei, just because it's something that I really enjoy talking about. You can obviously also work on your pressure. You can work on your breathing as you go through this, right? So for example, as you do your chasapokoseo and as you turn and cut, you can think about, okay, let me have 1 breath per combination, and maybe 1 breath per 10 cuts, maybe 1 breath for however many. So you can work on your lung capacity with that kind of stuff. Just gonna be a lot of other things that you can focus on in the future. But with that, what I'd like for you to focus on, so your drills, is that we have quite a few defenses that kind of were snuck into our basics, right? I want you to think about how you can use those in your fighting, in your sparring, right? So yes, we have our middle guard, and that's the one that we primarily use, right? So this is our middle guard. But remember, we also did, high guard. We did our Paosensei. We secretly also learned our other side Paosensei, as well as our low guard. Try to think of ways you can use those different defenses in your sparring, and then even look for them in your own forms. Now, obviously, so this defense happens a lot in the higher up ones with the Bangkok, right? This one happens also a little bit later, like in the Sangsu, right? So for Sangsu 7, right? The one-handed version of it, and Yedo 9, and all sorts of things, right? So there's going to be variations of it, right? So I just talked about the 1 versus 2-hand version of Chiase. There's going to be tons of other versions, maybe with also one-handed Paosensei in Yedo 7, right? We do a nice cut and then bun, right? So actually it's bun. Yeah, so you have one-handed Paosensei occasionally. So just think about where you see all those different defenses in your forms. But as usual, right? So now that we've covered our basics, we'll make sure you keep training, right? But also make sure you stay humble and stay safe. Haidong!